However, we can still earnestly hope that some of them will sincerely examine themselves and come to realize that they have been deceived by Satan. These should then come out of Babylon, the devil's organization. Revelation 18:4, quote, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues," unquote. How then does Isaiah 65:15 consistently not violate the continued use of the name Israel, which Yahweh chose to call his people? The answer is that this verse has been misinterpreted by most scholars. Yahweh never intended to change the name of his people, but he did intend to call Israel out by another one who naturally had another name. See Rotherham footnote. Whereas once Yahweh dealt with Israel personally, without a mediator, he has since given Yahshua, his beloved Son, the King of Israel, all authority and power, and caused him to inherit all things. Refer to Hebrews 1:1 and 2. We see the consistency of this understanding with Romans 9:7, which states, "But in Isaac shall thy seed be called." As has been before stated, Isaac was a type of the promised seed and prefigured Yahshua the Messiah coming to life in 1913, when his resurrected body members were placed in their respective positions. To those who claim that the verse pertains to the natural fleshly line of descent from Isaac, Romans 9:8 is herein quoted. Quote, "That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed." Unquote. Yahweh, the God of Israel, is the only true God. Jeremiah 10:10 has this to say, "But Yahweh is God in truth. He is a God that liveth, and a King of times age-abiding. At his anger quaketh the earth, and nations cannot endure his wrath." And also Jeremiah 10:16, "Not like these is the portion of Jacob, for the fashioner of all things is he, and Israel is his inherited scepter. Yahweh of hosts is his name." Unquote. It is he who says to Israel, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone. Thou shalt therefore love Yahweh thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might." Unquote. Deuteronomy 6:4 and 5, Rotherham translation. It is he who named his people Israel, and this name is certainly not to be substituted for a heathen appendage of contempt, which was tagged on to the true followers of Yahshua. The name Christian is Latin in its termination, so seems to have been given by the Romans. It is mentioned only 3 times in the Scriptures, Acts 11:26, Acts 26:28, and 1 Peter 4:16. It was a term of contempt and was never used by the saints of themselves, though there are hundreds of passages where it might have been used if that were the God-given name for his people. Paul never uses this term. Peter alone uses it once when referring to his fellow saints, and even this is disputed. King Agrippa's remark in Acts 26:28, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian," was a sarcastic remark. He was not almost persuaded. He showed no inclinations to continue receiving Paul's instruction. But Paul ignores his sarcasm and turns it into a sober wishing, answering in this manner, "I would to God that not only you, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds." Acts 26:29. Paul never followed through nor lent any support to Agrippa's scornful remark about becoming a Christian. Never did Paul say, "I wish you were a Christian," or would become a Christian. No, his answer was tactfully worded in wishing he and all who heard him were such as I am. In other words, I wish that you and all others who hear me to be exactly what I am, not a Christian. And what was Paul? An Israelite, of course, in every sense of the word. Listen to his own words. Quote, Acts 28:20, good speed. "That is why I asked to see you and speak with you, for it is on account of Israel's hope that I have to wear this chain." Unquote. There is some doubt as to whether Peter really used this term. The Sacred Name Testament employs the word believer rather than Christian. If, however, he did use it, It was no doubt because by that time they had been branded Christians by the overwhelming masses of the heathen, and it had now become a term of identification, especially among the non-believers. Interestingly enough, none of the other apostles or writers of the Greek scriptures, commonly known as the New Testament, ever even mention, let alone call the Lord's people Christians, but rather the term believers is used when addressing one another. It was common knowledge that they were all Israel, but there were both believers and non-believers in Jerusalem as to whether the Messiah had really come, and the believers had to be distinguished from the non-believers, not by the term Israel, for they all claimed to be Israel, but on whether they believed or did not believe that Yahweh had fulfilled his promise to Israel and had sent them the king who was to restore the kingdom to Israel. Acts 1:6, quote, "When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel?" Unquote. Even more so was the term brethren used, indicating that they firmly knew that they were all sons of the true God, whose purpose they understood, at which they worked harmoniously together as true brothers should, in seeing that the mission given to them to perform was accomplished to their Father's honor and glory. As concerning the promised blessings of Yahweh, it was only promised to a people whom he called Israel, and it is with them and them alone that he has dealings. Psalm 147, 19 and 20, New English Bible, quote, "To Jacob he makes his word known, his statutes and decrees to Israel. He has not done this for any other nation, nor taught them his decrees," unquote. Paul states in Romans 11, 25 and 26, concerning Israel, quote, "For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceit, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, There shall come out of Zion a deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob," unquote. This means that when the Gentiles believe, they become Israel and not Christians. Refer to Acts 26, 6 and 7, and Acts 28, 20. Galatians 6:16, taken from the New Testament by J.B. Phillips, has this to say, "To all who live by this principle, to the true Israel of God, may there be peace and mercy." Both the Old and the New Covenants were made Israel. Hebrews 8, 6 to 13, quote, "But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. And in that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away." Unquote. Yahweh, who has now led us to understand that Abraham, who was as one with Yahweh because of his faith, demonstrating this by doing his will implicitly, is used as a type of Yahweh. This he does for the benefit of his people Israel, that they may better understand his divine organization, both as to composition and as to time of fulfillment. In order to further develop the picture, Yahweh's woman Zion and Abraham's wife Sarah will be compared to note the similarities of their roles, their desire, their agonizing pain in seeing their hope seemingly deferred forever, and the final surprise ending in which their joy is fulfilled. Mount Zion in Jerusalem, which was called the City of David, was a type of the heavenly Zion, and Now that Zion has been established, she is well on her way to gathering her true children. These will total 200 million. Refer to Revelations 9:16. These Yahweh names Israel. Psalm 149, 1-4, quote, Praise ye the Lord. Sing unto the Lord a new song, and his praise in the congregation of saints. Let Israel rejoice in him that made him. Let the children of Zion be joyful in their king. Let them praise his name in the dance. Let them sing praises unto him with the timbrel and harp. For the Lord taketh pleasure in his people. He will beautify the meek with salvation. Unquote. Also Isaiah 46:13 has this to say, quote, I bring near my righteousness, it shall not be far off, and my salvation shall not tarry. And I will place salvation in Zion, for Israel, my glory. Unquote. Jacob or Israel, who pictured earthly Israel, could not be born until first the promised seed, Isaac, was born. Likewise, earthly Israel could not come into being until after the birth of the man-child, which Isaac typified. And as Israel, the man, was born in 1973 BC, 60 years after the birth of the typical promised seed, earthly Israel was born in 1973 AD, 60 years after 1913. The failure of both Jacob, Israel, and his children to receive the everlasting blessings promised them proves conclusively that these as yet were not the true Israel of God. Refer to Hosea 1, 6-10. Also Romans 9, 6-8. It was to those worthy of the name Israel, his true Israel, that these blessings would be bestowed, for Yahweh cannot lie. Titus 1:2. The Israel of old were in reality mere types of what is to be perfect and completely blissful fulfillment for the entire obedient human race. The name Israel implies that the one receiving this name must strive for Yahweh's blessing with all of his heart and soul and might. This was the name given to Jacob after he strove with Yahweh's angel all through the night in order to receive his blessings. Refer to Genesis 32, 24-30. Yahweh has caused these words to be recorded concerning the role played by the Israel of old. Quote, all these things that happened to them were symbolic and were recorded for our benefit as a warning, for upon us the fulfillment of the ages has come. 1 Corinthians 10:11, New English Bible. Colossians 2:16 and 17, Revised Standard Version, quote, Therefore let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath. These are only a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Unquote. Hebrews 8:4 and 5 has this to say, quote, If then he were still on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are already those who present the offerings in obedience to the law, and serve a copy and type of the heavenly things, just as Moses was divinely instructed when about to build a tabernacle. For God said, See that you make everything in imitation of the pattern shown you on the mountain. The writer of Hebrews quotes this from Exodus 20:40. This was Weymouth's translation, unquote. And finally, Hebrews 9:22-26, New English Bible. Quote, Indeed, according to the law, it might almost be said, everything is cleansed by blood, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. If then these sacrifices cleanse the copies of heavenly things, those heavenly things themselves require better sacrifices to cleanse them. For Christ has entered not that sanctuary made by men's hands, which is only a symbol of the reality, but heaven itself, to appear now before God on our behalf. Nor is he there to offer himself again and again, as the high priest enters the sanctuary year by year with blood not his own. If that were so, he would have had to suffer many times since the world was made. As it is, he has appeared once and for all at the climax of history to abolish sin by the sacrifice of himself. Unquote. The promises given to Abraham, as recorded in Genesis 12:7, and 13, 15 to 17, and 17, 1 to 8, were all leading up to the one true, all-important seed, which is Joshua, who was pictured by Isaac, and that it would be after his birth that the rest of the seed of Abraham would be called and blessed. As proof of this, Yahweh speaks to Abraham in this manner: "For in Isaac, or through Isaac, shall thy seed be called." Genesis 21:12. This means that all who have the one all-important characteristic possessed by Abraham, which is faith in Yahweh, and would therefore be counted as the seed or children of Abraham, would be called out by Yahshua, who collectively with his body members makes up the man-child. The justice of Yahweh reveals itself in this loving and just decision, for it was Yahshua the Messiah who paid the ransom price for the sins of the entire human race. We now belong to him, for we are bought with a price. 1 Corinthians 6:20. All those who truly appreciate this fact will obey him fully by following his leadership. These are guaranteed to be led to everlasting life and blessings. The importance of an accurate understanding of Yahweh's purpose cannot be overemphasized. How is anyone going to obey him if they don't understand what he wants them to do? Let the heathen take note. Yahweh deals with Israel alone, and he deals with them as a nation, his nation. Refer to Psalm 147, 19 and 20. For this reason, it is Israel alone who receives his instructions and understanding, and for the same reason they alone out of all the nations of this world are truly obeying him. Those who oppose Israel are opposing the King of Israel, for Israel are his chosen people. Refer to Matthew 25:40. In harmony with this, Genesis 22:15 to 18 is here considered. Quote, "And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the star of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice." Notice that the last line in verse 17 states, "And thy seed," the seed of Abraham, those possessing faith, "shall possess the gate of his enemies." The enemies of Israel are the enemies of our King, who is Yahshua the Messiah, which has been corrupted into the form Jesus Christ. Those who eventually band together in opposition to Israel will form the Antichrist that Yahweh has warned you against. Psalm 2, 1 to 12. Quote, "Why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder, and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings. Be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him." Unquote. Refer also to 1 John 2:18, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, so forth. Concerning the promise given to Abraham, the question that may arise at this time is, if the promise given to Abraham was fulfilled by bringing forth the typical seed, what was the need to repeat the promise to Isaac, who was the typical seed himself? Many will answer that Isaac was not the true seed, and therefore Yahweh repeated the promise to him in order to inform us that the true seed was still to come. If this were the answer, then Yahweh should have repeated it throughout each generation until he gave it to Joseph and Mary, and then stopped, for the true seed finally came to them. Here is a promise given to Isaac, Genesis 26, 3 and 4, quote, Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries. And I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed." Unquote. Remember, Isaac is a type of Yahshua. It is now as though Yahweh is speaking to Yahshua and telling him, "Unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries." The seed of Yahshua, who has now become the everlasting Father, Isaiah 11, is Israel. And true to form, Yahweh caused the typical man-child Isaac to produce Jacob or Israel, who was a type of earthly Israel. In other words, typical Israel followed Isaac, the typical man-child. And true Israel follows Yahshua, the true man-child. Isaac is now back on earth and will inherit the land along with faithful Israel according to the promise spoken to him. "Unto thee and unto thy seed will I give all these countries." But you may ask, how does Yahshua, the true seed, the one whom Yahweh was really referring to when he said, "Unto thee and unto thy seed will I give all of these countries," how does he gain possession of all of these countries if he is in the heavens? Psalm 2, 6-9 has the answer. Quote, "Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel." Unquote. Also Daniel 4:17, Rotherham translation, quote, "To the intent that the living may get to know that the Most High hath dominion over the kingdom of men, and to whomsoever he pleaseth he giveth it, and one low among men he setteth up over it." Unquote. This means that mankind will eventually realize that it is Yahweh who has dominion over all of the authority that he has given to men, and that he has given all things over to his beloved Son Yahshua. Colossians 1:15-16, "Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature." Quote verse 16, "For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him." Unquote. The one low among men that he sets up over it is one who is very low in the social ladder or register of this world, and is to be identified by being the eldest of the resurrected prophets, which makes him the firstborn among his brothers. Quote Jeremiah 1:9-10. "Then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said unto me, Behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out, to pull down, and to destroy, and to throw down, to build and to plant." Unquote. It is through the knowledge that Yahweh reveals through Yahshua's eldest son, the one who has been given the birthright to carry out his Father's interest here on earth, that Israel will glorify Yahweh and become his battle axe and weapons of war. It is the wisdom first revealed to Jeremiah, and that Israel must make a complete break from these heathen nations and to face and continue an uncompromising stand in this direction that sets Israel apart from all other nations and identifies them as Yahweh's true chosen people. Placed in this most honored position, Israel becomes his inheritance, Isaiah 19:25 and Jeremiah 51:19. It is Israel alone who proved to be the meekest of all peoples, for they listen to Yahweh's righteous decrees and do not offer him back their own brand of religion, thereby opposing him. It is these meek ones who will inherit the earth. It is they who are all eyes and ears when the Father speaks. It is they who are as little children, thrilled with anticipation at what their Father has to offer. Because of this attitude toward their God, Israel proves to be by far the most intelligent people on all the earth, for they choose to receive their instruction from the all-wise God alone. Now it is understood why the promise was repeated to Isaac. It pointed to Jacob, or Israel, who was a type of earthly Israel.
And it is the fulfillment of this type, or true Israel, who will inherit the Gentiles and possess the gate of his Yahshua's enemies. Isaiah 54:3, Isaiah 65. The picture now appears to be complete. The roles as types of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Israel, have taken us from Yahweh to Yahshua and to earthly Israel. And it is Israel who becomes citizens of the New Jerusalem, whose king is Yahshua, and they will possess the earth forever. Apparently, the types are now completed. Yahweh should stop here, for we understand it all now. But again, the promise is repeated, and this time to Jacob. Genesis 28:10-14, quote, "And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillow, and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth. And thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Unquote. You will notice a variation in the theme of this blessing as compared to the blessings given to Abraham and Isaac. The difference being that a ladder is set up on earth with the top of it reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Yahweh is in this manner informing us that it is earthly Israel that the heavens will contact. These angels or messengers carry Yahweh's instructions to earthly Israel in a continuous flow of communication, coming down and delivering Yahweh's instructions and going back to him for more. For behold, the Lord stood above it. Yahweh standing above the ladder means that the will of Yahweh is being carried out, and not that Yahweh contacts the angels directly himself. This is done through Jerusalem, the holy city, which in turn receives her instructions from Yahshua, the head of Zion, Yahweh's capital organization. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, Isaiah 2:3. Another variation found in the text of this blessing is that Israel will spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. This means definitely that the promised land has no boundaries, but will in fact include the entire earth. This understanding is in harmony with the blessings given to Abraham, even though its wording presents a different view of the same picture. Quote, "And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies." Unquote. Who are the enemies of Yahshua? All the nations who hate Israel. And who are the nations who will hate Israel? Ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Matthew 24:9. Isaiah 14:1-7 reveals also that when Israel is fully restored, that, quote verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing, unquote. This proves conclusively that Israel will possess the entire earth. However, the same promise given to Isaac and mentioned in Genesis 26:4 was repeated to Israel in Genesis 28:14, which states, quote, "And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed," unquote. The word translated families, mishpachah, does extend and incorporate the meaning also of a tribe or people, a kind of people. In fact, the Septuagint and Douay versions translate this word tribes. The Good News Bible, the Living Bible, and James Moffat translates it nations. For Yahweh to repeat this promise to Jacob or Israel, wherein a seed is again mentioned, reveals to us that the entire picture of the future nation of Israel, which was portrayed by Israel the man, had not as yet been completed in Jacob. As the promise given to Abraham was not completely fulfilled in Isaac, so was the promise given to Isaac not completely fulfilled in Israel. As the promise repeated to Isaac left a lingering foretaste of some beautiful and magnificent fulfillment in the future for the human race, likewise the promise given to Israel continues to guide us in that which is still to come and directs our eyes to the future. As Yahweh's Holy Spirit is increasingly poured upon Israel, he begins to unravel before them the deep and intricate pattern designed by him and recorded by man centuries ago in order that his chosen people Israel may now construct his holy building according to the plan which he now reveals to them from this pattern, in order that Israel may follow each detail unto completion. The picture continues to grow as more details are added, as Genesis 35:11 and 12 discloses. Quote, "And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land." Unquote. Yahweh is telling his people not to despair, but to continue on, for this is your future. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee. At first glance, this may sound contradictory to other passages in Yahweh's holy word, which unequivocally point to Yahweh's nation as being one nation. Zephaniah 2:1, Septuagint. Quote, "Be ye gathered and closely joined together, O unchastened nation." Unquote. Isaiah 26:2, quote, "Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in." Unquote. Matthew 6:10, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," and so forth. Nor can this be satisfactorily explained away as meaning that there will be other Gentile nations independent of Israel, for there will be no separate dealings with any Gentile nations, for Israel will be in full control forever. Isaiah 27:6, quote, "He shall cause them that come of Jacob to take root. Israel shall blossom and bud, and fill the face of the world with fruit." Unquote. Refer also to Psalm 147:19 and 20, and Psalm 13:4. As for the majority of the survivors of Armageddon, who will not be Israel, whom Yahweh calls strangers or aliens, these will not rule themselves apart from Israel, for they will perform the will of Yahweh under Israel's direction. Isaiah 61:5, quote, "The strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the aliens shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers." Unquote. Isaiah 14:1 and 2, quote, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors." Unquote. Isaiah 45:14, Living Bible, quote, "Jehovah says, the Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Sabians shall be subject to you. They shall come to you with all their merchandise, and it shall be yours. They shall follow you as prisoners in chains, and fall down on their knees before you, and say, the only God there is your God." Unquote. Also Isaiah 60:10, quote, "And the sons of strangers shall build thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee. For in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee." Unquote. A company of nations is rendered a multitude of nations in Rotherham's translation, or according to the footnote, a convocation of nations. Convocation means the assembling together of different members of one organization to promote the common interest. These members could be close at hand or in separate or isolated territories. Smith renders it in this manner: a nation, or rather a company of nations. That which the translator is pointing out is that this company of nations is really one nation. The Living Bible states, quote, "A great nation, yes, many nations," unquote. "Yes, many nations" follows in support of the fact that it is many nations that will really make up this one great nation. The translators do not understand Yahweh's secret purpose. This is given to his chosen people, Israel, alone. But they, as linguists, are attempting to translate to the best of their ability that which was originally recorded in the ancient Hebrew tongue. With this line of reasoning in mind, the Douay Bible's translation of this verse is most interesting, and is given in this manner, quote, "Nations and peoples of nations shall be from thee." This indeed supports the understanding that a number of nations will be involved, but goes on to say peoples of nations. The word peoples does not mean a great number of people, for the word people is itself in the plural form. But people does indicate different kinds of people or races of people. Peoples of nations or nations of peoples or nations of races or kinds or a race of people for each nation. In short, the different nations will be made up of the different races working unitedly together to form the one great nation, or according to Smith, a nation, or rather a company of nations. Israel will be made up of all races, and Israel will be at the helm in each of these distinct allotted liberties that together make up the whole of Yahweh's holy kingdom. All of these nations will together be singing the praises of Yahweh, glory in the highest unto God, and on earth peace among men of good will. Matthew 2:14, Rotherham translation. Verse 12 of Genesis 35 would make it appear as though Yahweh is now taking back the land which he had promised to Abraham and Isaac, and giving it to Israel. Verse 12, quote, "And the land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land," unquote. Yahweh is not taking back anything. What this really means is that Israel will inherit the entire earth, for they are his inheritance. They are the meek which will inherit the earth, and everyone on earth will be subject to the ruling organization which will be Israel. This includes the 200 million who are the rulers themselves. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Isaiah 2:3. Abraham and Isaac, who precede Israel, must themselves be subject to Israel, now that they are back, even though they become a part of Israel themselves. Yahweh demonstrates this fact by handing everything over to Israel, the man who was a type of earthly Israel, and his seed who represent the total number of those who would make up Israel. As has been previously stated, Abraham pictured Yahweh and Sarah Zion, and out of Zion came forth the man-child, pictured by Isaac. One of the similarities in the life of typical Zion, Sarah, and true Zion are that they both remain barren for what in our eyes seemed to be an unreasonable length of time. Sarah gave birth to the typical promised seed at 90 years of age, and Zion brought forth the man-child 3,946 years after the birth of the type, or almost 1,900 years later than anticipated by the apostles and the early church. Refer to Acts 2:16, James 5:8, 1 Peter 4:7. Of course, Yahweh had not as yet revealed his chronology and made clear the length of time that must first transpire before the fulfillment could ever begin. This is now understood. This knowledge is indeed a great comfort to Israel today. After Isaac came Israel, who was a type of the nation of Israel on earth. Jacob, or Israel, was born 60 years after the birth of Isaac, the typical man-child, or in the spring of 1973 BC, and 60 years after 1913, which was the date of the birth of the true man-child, or in the spring of 1973, earthly Israel was born. This event was marked by a sudden acceptance by others of the secrets revealed to Jeremiah, in which for the previous 30 years he could share with one family alone, for no others could even begin to understand. This marked the beginning of the pouring out of Yahweh's Holy Spirit, resulting in the gathering of the elders of Israel, and marked the time for Yahweh to anoint the most holy, recorded in Daniel 9:24, or as Smith's translation words this event, to consecrate the most sacred place. This was exactly 56 years after Yahshua came to his temple in 1917 and began to rule in Zion. See Daniel 9:25 and 26. These deep and long-hidden mysteries are understood by the elders of true Israel today, and it will be left to them to explain to the newer members of Israel as they find their way home. A listing of events and their dates will be briefly treated to demonstrate the consistency of Yahweh's true timetable. In order to begin, the name of Charles Taze Russell must be mentioned, for he was the first of the remnant of the body of Yahshua to be gathered after the devil had deceived the whole world and held them in darkness for centuries. This remnant is described as the feet of him, meaning those who make up the last members of the body of Yahshua. This is mentioned in Isaiah 52:7. This man began doubting the teaching of the school of modern theology and embarked on a course of investigation, testing and searching by himself and with others who professed to know. It was not until 1873 that the small group with him gained sufficient knowledge to know where they were going. The dates are as follows: 1873, 40 years to resurrection, 1913. 1873, 100 years to birth of earthly Israel, 1973. 2033 BC in the spring, birth of Isaac, the typical man-child. 60 years later, Israel was born, 1973 BC. 1913, birth of man-child to birth of Israel, 60 years, 1973. 1917, Yahshua began ruling in Zion by coming to his temple. 56 years later, holy place was consecrated. 1973. See Daniel 9:24-26. 3444 AM, or Anno Mundo, the year of the destruction of the 10 tribes, added to the length of time that Israel lay dormant, which was 2,556 years, total 6,000 years, and brings us to 1917, the beginning of the restoration of Israel. Dates should not be added or subtracted to periods of time, as this can become confusing. The 638.5 BC is actually the spring of the year, for BC ended in October, and counting backwards 638.5 years brings us to the spring of 638 BC. The simplest solution is to total the number of years from creation to the fall of Israel, which event occurred 3,444 years later, or 3,444 AM, and add the length of time it lay dormant, 2,556 years, and we arrive at the time of its restoration at the end of 6,000 years, which in the modern calendar is 1917. This is when Yahshua came to his temple and began to rule in the New Jerusalem, and therefore marks the beginning of the restoration of Israel. Yahweh has much to tell us about Israel. Therefore their roles as types continue to be revealed. These, as dramas on a stage, are acted out before us, and the portrayal of the message intended can be better understood by Israel after viewing the play. The result will be the understanding of the intricate parts, their placement and function in the overall machinery of the earthly organization. Israel had 12 sons, and from them originated the 12 tribes of Israel. And it is by using both the sons and their tribes that Yahweh instructs his Israel of promise in these last days. Contrary to popular belief, none of the tribes were ever cut off because of disobedience and replaced by another disobedient tribe to continue the portrayal of the former tribe's role. The final judgment came upon the tribes when their role as types were complete, and there were no more pictures to be made, for the Israel of the flesh was not the Israel of God. Yahweh having something much better in store for all obedient people. That which they foreshadowed was to be fulfilled by the Israel of promise, the true Israel of God. The Israel of promise is composed of people of all races, wherein each and every one strives for Yahweh's blessing and proves himself, even as Jacob did. At times, the sons or the tribes were used as mere numbers, wherein the understanding intended to be conveyed was symbolized by the number or numbers alone without any other activity required. Such was the case when he divided the sons into two groups, one of 10 and the other of 2, or the tribes into 10 and 1, the 10 symbolizing all or completeness in an earthly sphere, so that those banded together in 10 typified all of a kind, or that which pertains to the earthly portion of Israel. Yahweh has at this time decreed that the elders of Israel must understand the prophetic words spoken by Jacob on his deathbed in order to better understand the structure of his kingdom, and that this knowledge may be used by you as added weaponry in your most noble and aggressive campaign that you are now conducting against the forces of the heathen. You must remember, Yahweh is watching his people in action, and he loves you for it, and will continue to use you with ever-increasing and rewarding privileges. Genesis 49, 1 and 2, quote, "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel, your father." Unquote. As the first verse states, their prophetic roles are to be fulfilled in the last days. Verse 3, quote, "Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power." This means that the dignity and the power of the birthright was to be Reuben's, because he was the firstborn. This title consisted of succeeding to his father's rank and position as head of the family or tribe, and as the firstborn, he inherited a double portion of his father's property. This typified that those whom Yahweh deems worthy to receive this honor, he will raise to the preeminent position of the firstborn, and that these would be endowed with authority over the others and receive a double portion of his Holy Spirit to maintain their authority throughout eternity. Jeremiah 31:9. Verse 4, "Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, or you shall not have preeminence," Revised Standard Version, or "grow thou not," Douay Version, "because you have went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. You went up to my couch," Revised Standard Version. The fact that Reuben was the firstborn indicates that he was qualified for and capable of holding this office and receiving and maintaining this honor. The fact that he lost it does not qualify him for a lesser role, for he failed in that which he was qualified to do. For example, if a stranger were to be subjected to what would be a fair trial for him, and he fails in what he is qualified and capable of enduring or overcoming, where is his reward? The answer is that there will be no beneficial reward. The sentence will be death. It must here and now be stated that there has been no final judgment passed upon Reuben, but as an actor in a drama whose merits are weighed, he is found wanting, and is one that is removed from the total number of inheritors. In this inspired and prophetic declaration, the inheritance, or lack of it, will be realized in the last days, and has to do with whether Reuben's tribe or nation would be lastingly established in Israel. With the removal of Reuben, there now remains 11 more inheritors to be identified. Verses 5 and 6, quote, "Simon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. O my soul, come not into their counsel, or never enter their circle," Smith's translation. "O my spirit, be not joined to their company, or never join in their assembly," Smith's. "For in their anger they slew a man, and in their wantonness they hamstrung oxen," Revised Standard Version. This means that Jacob, who pictured earthly Israel, would have no part in this circle of men, or be a part of their schemes, or take part in their counsel, never even to be a part of their assembly in order not to plot with them with their misdeeds. Verse 7, quote, continues in this manner, "Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and scatter them in Israel. Jacob pronounced a curse on their anger, which was never lifted, and still stands to this day. The sentence passed upon them that they would be divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel means that they would have no identity as tribes or nations in Israel. This now leaves 9. Verse 8, quote, Revised Standard Version. Judah, your brother shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Unquote. Judah the man set no virtuous examples warranting any praise from his brothers, but it was to be that he who came from Judah, that his brothers or fellow Israelites would praise, and that he would be the one that would gain a death grip on his enemies, and that all of Israel will bow down to and be submissive to him. This prophecy leads us to Joshua and is fulfilled in him. Verse 9, quote, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion, as a lioness who dare rouse him up. Unquote. Judah being a lion's whelp means that he is a royal descendant and that he was in line to reign and would be given this authority as soon as he matured, or that his kingship would be manifest in the future, for the lion is named the king of beasts. The conduct of a lion when hunting is unassuming, deliberate, and bold. As an old lion, who shall rouse him up? Authorized Version. Or who dare disturb him? Smith's translation. This means that no one in their right minds would be foolish enough to disturb an old lion, for they would be inviting certain death. Likewise, anyone opposing Yahshua would bring about his own destruction. Verse 10, quote, Revised Standard Version. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Unquote. The scepter or rod held in the hands of a king as a token of authority would not be taken away from the tribe of Judah until it was given to the one to whom it belongs. This means that there would remain a king in the tribe of Judah until the one to whom it rightfully belonged came, and it would be he whom Israel would obey in the last days. The prophecy was fulfilled in Judah, for Yahshua came to Jerusalem in Judah, even though it had by this time been reduced to a vassal state. Unlike the 10 tribes of Israel, whose identity was lost after they had completed their roles as types by being scattered throughout the heathen nations, Jerusalem was still there at the coming of their Messiah. Verse 11, quote, Authorized Version. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. Unquote. A foal, according to Strong's Concordance, indicates a young donkey, or just broken to a load, in the sense of raising, that is, bearing a burden. Other translators, Smith, Young, New English Bible, Rotherham, translate the word foal to mean an ass or a donkey, making it a full-grown animal and burden bearer, thereby distinguishing it from the donkey's colt, which truly depicts a young animal. The word translated colt is B-E-N, pronounced bane, and is the same word translated bough or fruitful bough in Genesis 49:22 when describing Joseph. It has to do primarily with an increase, or a great increase. The ass or donkey is a beast of burden, and the colt of a donkey, if it has not already been initiated to burden bearing, will most certainly be in the very near future, for that is the relationship that is intended and does exist between this particular animal and man. The ass or donkey, as a beast of burden, is much more highly esteemed in the East than in the Western world. It is also a far superior animal than the one we are accustomed to seeing. It is described as being erect in bearing, the limbs well-formed and muscular, and the gait graceful. It is spiritual and withal docile. The upper classes in Israel, such as kings and their sons and all of the elite, rode upon donkeys. 1 Kings 1:33, Judges 5:10, Judges 10:4, and Judges 12:14. It is not held in contempt for stupidity, as with us. Issachar is compared to a strong ass, crouching down between two burdens, of which more will be said later. Rotherham translates these lines in this manner, quote, binding to the vine his ass, and to the choice vine his ass's colt, unquote. Young's, Smith's, and New English Bible translations are practically identical. The one who does this binding or tying is the ruler who comes from the line of Judah, and this is Yahshua. The excellency of the vine above all trees is its fruit, and the fruit is representative of spiritual blessings in the form of revealed truths. The wicked who reject Yahweh will have these precious guiding truths withheld from them at the time of their greatest dilemma, and for them these scriptures are in order. Isaiah 24:7, quote, the new wine mourneth, the vine languisheth, all the merry-hearted do sigh, unquote. Jeremiah 8:13, quote, I will surely consume them, saith the Lord. There shall be no grapes on the vine, nor figs on the fig tree, and the leaf shall fade, and the things that I have given them shall pass away from them, unquote. Joel 1:11-18, quote, be ye ashamed, O ye husbandmen, howl, O ye vine. Rotherham's translation. Be not thou afraid, O soil, exult and rejoice, because Yahweh hath shown himself great in doing. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for sprouteth have the pastures of the wilderness. For the tree hath borne its fruit, the fig tree and the vine hath yielded their wealth. Ye sons of Zion, then exult and be glad in Yahweh your God, for he hath given you the seed ring, cause send for you seed. So shall the threshers be fat through vine and oil. Then will I make good to you the years which were eaten by the swarming locust, the grass locust, and the corn locust, and the creeping locust, even my great army, the years which were eaten by the swarming locust, the grass locust, and the corn locust, and the creeping locust, even my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat, and be satisfied, and shall praise the name of Yahweh your God, who hath dealt with you wondrously. So shall my people not be abashed unto time's age abiding. So shall ye know that in the midst of Israel I am, and that I, Yahweh, am your God, and none else. And my people shall not be abashed unto time's age abiding. And it shall come to pass afterwards, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. Moreover also upon the servant, upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. And I will set forth wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awful day of Yahweh. And it shall come to pass, whosoever shall call on the name of Yahweh shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be a delivered remnant, just as Yahweh hath said, and among the survivors whom Yahweh doth call. Unquote. The donkey and the colt, the two burden bearers, represent Yahshua's two servants here on earth. The elder he ties to the vine, the younger to the choice vine. It does not require an unusually keen imagination to picture what would take place if a donkey were tied to a grapevine. There would not be the slightest hesitation to assail the vine with the intentions of devouring its fruit. The word vine, translated choice vine, is sorek in the Hebrew, and according to Strong's Concordance, a vine stock, properly one yielding purple grapes, the richest variety, choice or choicest. To the vine, Yahshua ties the younger of the two burden bearers. These two are the two divisions of Israel in these last days, whom Yahweh uses to bear the entire burden of proclaiming the kingdom message. These alone meet with his approval, for they are not a part of Satan's world, as are the religions of Christendom. These two he uses to expose Satan's wicked organization to the open view of all, which will result in its complete and everlasting destruction. It is these two branches of Israel alone, Manasseh and Ephraim, whereby Yahweh will be glorified, and these are fulfilled in Jehovah's Witnesses, Manasseh, the elder, and the restored Israel, Yahweh, Ephraim, the younger. The name Manasseh means causing to forget, indicating that Joseph, true Israel, was comforted with the birth of his first son. Likewise, it was a comfort to see Yahweh's purpose begin to move forward and to increase with the birth of Jehovah's Witnesses. However, Ephraim means double fruitfulness, or doubly fruitful. This does not imply that the limits of Ephraim will be merely double that of Manasseh. For when a fruitful yield is double the normal yield, it becomes a fantastic yield. And if this were to be literal, the weight of the fruit would be far more than the branch or vine could bear. Furthermore, the yield of Manasseh will be given over to Ephraim, Jeremiah 15:19. And Ephraim, whose chief rulers are the resurrected prophets of old, will take the lead and maintain it throughout eternity. Jeremiah 15:19, quote, "Therefore thus saith the Lord, if thou return, then will I bring thee again, and thou shalt stand before me. And if thou take forth the precious from the vile, thou shalt be as my mouth. Let them return unto thee, but return not thou unto them." Unquote. The colt, who is tied to the choice vine, represents Ephraim, the younger of the two, and it is he who gains access to and partakes of the superior spiritual food. It is superior in that it's newly revealed in order to prepare and to guide Ephraim in its campaign against the heathen, and to instruct and answer the questions of all sincere people in a manner that they never believed would be possible. Manasseh is not to be compared to Ephraim. Manasseh has not only come to a halt, but is slipping backward from its once progressive uphill fight. He has no new information, and the old truths which he occasionally changes in order to add a little spice and variety to the menu are for the most part errors from his uninspired staff of writers. And if Yahweh did not send Ephraim to the rescue, they would soon be swallowed up entirely by Satan's organization and disappear from the scene. Manasseh is now baffled at the information possessed by Ephraim, but is fearful of taking the first step. Ephraim, however, is accustomed to feeding from the choice vine and is in a sense spoiled, and the ordinary fruit consumed by Manasseh would not satisfy the luxury that Ephraim's taste buds are now accustomed to. Manasseh knows nothing about Ephraim and Manasseh, or earthly Israel, nor the return of the prophets. They used to know about the prophets, but they changed that to flatter their own members by making them